Yeah, that's good. Yeah, okay. Hey, I'm Ross.
And I'm Jonathan.
This week, we're going to look at exactly what it is that Jesus is restoring.
So this week, we want to talk a little bit more about what exactly was broken and what is it specifically that God is restoring.
That's a great question. When we look at Genesis 1 and 2, God creates everything, and he says it's really good. So there was this right relationship between humanity and God. There was right relationship horizontally, like between Adam and Eve. There was a right relationship between humanity and creation, and we had a right understanding of who we were in relation to God. And all of those things were broken. So the project, the mission that God is on, that he's been on since Genesis 3, really, all the way through to Revelation 21, is this idea, Revelation 22, is this idea of reunion and restoring all that was lost. And so, we've kind of touched on this one a lot, and maybe it's the one that we think of the most, but this idea of restoring the broken relationship between God and man. How are you seeing that, kind of worked out?
I think that is the part that we most often think of when we think of the gospel or when we hear the gospel presented. And it's maybe the part that we recognize the most when we come into an awareness of who God is and how holy and perfect he is.
Yeah.
That's a very obvious gap to us, that we're separated from God. But maybe like the next thing that we often think of is that the gospel doesn't just bring reconciliation between us and God, but it brings reconciliation between us and other people.
Yeah, that's where racial, economic, cultural barriers, are kind of broken down. That's the whole point of the gospel, that we're all in Christ together now.
I think another aspect of that too is not just the restoration of our relationship with others, but also the restoration of our relationship with ourselves, which is a relationship that we probably think about the least. And the idea of loving yourself can sometimes take on this meaning of like being prideful or egotistical, but Jesus' command to love your neighbor as yourself really is predicated on this idea that you have the ability to love yourself and take care of yourself. One of the first things that we see in the story of the fall is that Adam and Eve's response to what they had done was shame, that they hid from God, not just out of a sense of guilt for their actions, but a sense of shame that they needed to hide themselves.
Right. There's something wrong with them now.
Right. That what God had said about them originally, that they were very good, was somehow not true now.
Yeah. And I think that also is, the idea of disease, that cripples people for being able to take care of themselves. And those are the things that God is also working to restore. And, I think that happens through, vocations, doctors and nurses. And the last one that we talked about was this idea of our relationship with creation. And I think this is one that we really never think about that much. And it has a huge impact, So just the idea of how do we care for creation? God made everything before he made humanity, and he called it good.
Right.
And then on day 6, before he rested, he makes humanity. And it says we're the image of God, and he gives us a job description. He says, go and be cultivators and creators. And so a right relationship with creation is really this idea that we have an appropriate understanding of our responsibility to creation and how we use it. And just think about all the labor that goes in with the idea of creation. This house came from trees.
Right.
It came from stone. These are things that God gave us. And we take them and we use them appropriately, or we don't.
It's very tangible. Oftentimes part of this reduction of the gospel is that it becomes just a spiritual thing.
Right.
It doesn't include a picture of what God created.
And it's a really exciting thing to see that God is actively doing all these things, and there's no broken or lost thing that escapes his plan for restoration and restoring shalom.